Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we are continuing to break down the Thursday night football game between the Cowboys and the Giants. We just talked on the Dallas side of things. On the other end, there are a couple different ways you can look at this game for the Giants because they did come in, at least when we recorded yesterday, they were 6-point underdogs. I believe that the line moved to 5 points by kickoff, but either way, not a game that the Giants were expected to win, especially coming into the season. You sort of feel like the Cowboys are on a different playing field than the Giants, but they kept things very competitive throughout, which I do think is a good sign for the Giants. The pessimistic person, and I'm seeing a lot of negativity towards the Giants this morning online, is the fact that they did go a second game out of 4 weeks so far that they have not scored an offensive touchdown. And that ultimately falls on the shoulders of Daniel Jones, who has been, I think to some degree, a scapegoat over the years for the Giants, that they have been a largely flawed roster and he's just been sort of keeping them alive. I don't think you can totally make that same argument this year. The Giants do have a lot more talent on the offensive side of the ball. You look at the emergence of Malik Nabers, he's been incredible these past few weeks in this game. 12 receptions and 115 yards. Now, he did leave late with a concussion. So he might, you get a little bit of a mini bye week playing on Thursday night this week. The Giants wouldn't play again until, I believe, next Sunday, as I'm double checking the schedule here. Yeah, next Sunday in Seattle. So he will probably be questionable for that game. But either way, definitely a huge positive to see how much of an impact Malik Nabers has had so early in the season, and that's huge for them. They are awfully reliant on him, which to some degree, just get the ball in the hands of your best player. I understand that, but you also look at that sort of stretch of plays in the fourth quarter where Malik Nabers, he had the fourth down conversion, and then they went right back to Nabers on back-to-back plays that ultimately, he ended up being really gassed at the end of that. A couple times his teammates had to sort of pick him up off the turf, and I believe that might have been his last catch was that loss of 1 on the third play of that sequence that I'm referring to. But, I think that I understand, get the ball in the hands of him. It's very clear as well, though, that they do need sort of other players to step up for them. Now, Wan'Dale Robinson does appear to be emerging as a legitimate number 2 option for them, a former second-round pick in this game. He also has double-digit catches, 11 for 71. Maybe not quite as much of the explosive upside as a Malik Nabers, but, you now have a couple legitimate options to sort of surround Daniel Jones with. Now, Devin Singletary didn't do much of anything in this game, 14 carries for 24 yards. I thought he was still overall very solid for them. He had a couple of huge runs. The one specifically was the 4th and inches where he looked like he was dead to rights in the backfield and ended up being able to spin away from a defender. It was Donovan Wilson coming off of the left edge, untouched. Singletary was able to spin out of that, get to the outside, and sort of high step his way to the first down. Thought that there were a couple positive runs in there. Did a fine job in pass pro as well as a blocker, but really just didn't have many opportunities for him in front of it. And should have mentioned this on the more Cowboys side of this equation as well, is that the Cowboys, for being the worst statistical run defense in the NFL coming into this game, did do an excellent job of bottling up Singletary and that entire Giants rushing attack. 24 carries for 26 yards. That is abysmal if you're on the Giants, but that is something that we sort of keyed in on as we previewed this game yesterday, that the Cowboys needed to do so, and they did it. And that's the thing, is the run game was non-existent, so there are a lot of people now this morning sort of seemingly fed up with Daniel Jones, and I understand to some degree that there is a very clear lack of playmaker with Daniel Jones, where he's pretty efficient. Last night he was solid for the majority of the night, 29 of 40, 281 yards and an interception. The interception came basically on a prayer deep shot right at the end of the game, so I don't even necessarily hold that against him. But you now talk about the fact that there are some solid receiver options in Nabers and Robinson, and then you want to throw Darius Slayton in there as well, who Slayton on a couple of occasions beat Dallas defenders downfield, and Jones just does not seem to have the arm strength whatsoever to really be able to deliver these downfield strikes, where there was one play where, there was somebody, Jeremy Lapidus of the Sports by GSMC podcast, he talked about it could have been caught. This was during a production meeting we had. It definitely could have been caught. It hit Slayton in the hands, but it was also very much an underthrown ball, and this was a situation where, he had a lot of room in front of him. And then additionally, earlier in the game, there was a free play where Jones, a couple times, by the way, a little Rodgers-esque of getting the Cowboys defense to jump off sides and get some free plays for themselves. He had another opportunity where Slayton beat Trayvon Diggs on the right side, but Jones just, again, massively underthrew him, and it ended up being an interception that was called back because of the free play, so no harm, no foul there. But you're talking about, okay, it wasn't an interception. It definitely could have been a touchdown, though, if Jones delivers that sort of where it should have been. And that's the thing, is just the complete lack of really having a quarterback with that type of downfield talent. Now, that doesn't mean that Daniel Jones is a definitively bad quarterback. That, again, I think the efficiency is solid for him. Not that he was really using his legs last night, but there is at least some element of mobility there. But all of that being said, when you are going almost $48 million against the cap, that's where you have to be able to make open plays like that when they are downfield, and that those redeeming qualities just aren't necessarily there. So we can say that I don't think that Daniel Jones was bad last night, but when you're talking about Jones coming into this season, basically this is not quite a contract year for him. He has 2 more years on his deal, but neither of them fully guaranteed, and the Giants have an out in his contract this upcoming offseason, and I find it very hard to imagine that they are going to pass up on that, because I wouldn't want to pay Daniel Jones, above $40 million moving forward. It would be $41.6 million against the cap in 2025, and then that would jump all the way up to $58.6 million in 2026. And that is just not the level of quarterback play you're getting from him. Where, again, I think he's scapegoated. I think that there are still a lot of issues on this team. They did a much better job, I think, ultimately speaking, of being able to keep him on his feet and the offensive line not being quite a disaster. That is obviously a very good defensive front, specifically the edge rushers of Parsons and Lawrence on that front end to be able to generate pressure there. And all things considered, they did a very good job, in my opinion, of keeping Jones, for the most part, pressure-free in this game. You are seeing the development of Andrew Thomas, who now is a legitimate, go-to left tackle that was able to shut down Micah Parsons for the majority of this game. Got absolutely tossed at one point by Parsons on a specific run play, but again, you talk about this idea that Daniel Jones, for years, I have been on board with. I think that he gets a lot of slack and that there's a lot more factors outside of his play alone that are contributing to the Giants not being a good team, and that we're starting to see, the key developments from the remainder of the roster. We're not seeing those steps forward of improvement from Daniel Jones. And that's where I just think it's sort of written in the stars at this point that they are eventually going to move off from him after this season. Now, a lot of people as well calling for the benching of Daniel Jones. The reality is, I don't think that they're any better off with Drew Lock starting these games. I mean, Drew Lock anyways, it would be somewhat of a miracle if he developed into a legitimate franchise quarterback for the Giants that made them pass up on using their draft pick this upcoming year on a quarterback. I just don't think that that's a realistic outcome. So I do feel like Daniel Jones makes you more competitive in the now. And as much as, maybe there are Giants fans out there who say, who cares, just sort of tank the season out and try and get a better draft pick next year, Brian Daboll is still to some degree coaching for his job. Now, I've said on the show a number of times that I think that that's a little bit of an unfair mark against Brian Daboll because the team has been so bad and there is such limitation. But that's also where you look at Jones in this game. And I, at least from my own tally, when I went back and rewatched the game this morning, there were 9 occasions where Jones threw on third down, threw it significantly short of the line to gain, and that's not even including this one other pass to Wan'Dale Robinson that, did ultimately end up being marked short, but it was right at that sort of yard line to gain. So I didn't even include that in there as well, but there's just a complete lack of, aggression with this offensive attack. Now, it's definitely partially on Daniel Jones, knowing that he can't necessarily deliver those deep strikes. I think it's also a little bit on Brian Daboll. I understand that he's made it very clear to everybody that he doesn't trust Daniel Jones, that, he's kind of, mad about the situation. That's who they're paying so much money to. But also, you were part of the core that decided to give him that contract. And, at some point, it's just excuse making. You got to be able to develop a game plan that continues to extend drives, because they were 3 for 3 on their first fourth down shots, and they never turned any of those possessions into touchdowns, where they ended up settling for field goals on every one of them, where I feel like there's a lot of bad coaching in the NFL. That's the thing, is you can't have it both ways. I think it was smart of him for more times than not to just take the points, but that's the thing, is this is your former coach of the year and somebody who was receiving all the praise in the world after 2022 when he brought the Giants to the playoffs, and we've just seen a complete, I don't know if I would consider it a lack of innovation with that offense, but we are very much lacking any sort of, explosiveness. Now, Malik Nabers is going to be able to sort of change that up to some degree, and he will be able to just inherently in himself. I mean, you look at that first drive and one of the third down conversions of him snapping the ankles of Andrew Booth, the young cornerback there on the outside. So Malik Nabers inherently will bring some of those explosive plays, but you can't just be reliant on one player to do it all for you, whether it's Daniel Jones and him stepping up more, or if it's Brian Daboll needing to sort of change things. And he took responsibility for the fact that they were so ineffective in the run game. He talked about how he needed to be better and that they tried some different things and none of it really worked for them. So this is obviously an entire team process, but the Giants offense just not living up to the standard that they should be. And give credit to the defense on the other end, because they were the reason why this was a game throughout. That front seven was excellent. They, other than really that breakdown from Banks and Newman on the back end for the 55-yard CeeDee Lamb touchdown, I thought that they played very well and were causing havoc for that young, inexperienced Cowboys offensive line. So the Giants are not a complete dumpster fire at this point. There are things for them to continue to build on, but the pressure is sort of heating up on a number of different people within that building. It's specifically Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll, and general manager, blanking on his first name, but Joe Shane sounds right. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section, as I sort of want to move on here now to the remainder of the games for this Week 4 NFL slate. And I want to talk about some of the games that can specifically answer questions for the common NFL fan based off of how these teams perform this upcoming weekend. So we are going to be taking a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.